Hello, this is John Feldt. Welcome to the weekly water outlook for Texas and the southern region, recorded on March 31st, 2013. Wanted to point out here the rainfall and snow over the last week. Areas in green received the most precipitation up in Kansas. It was in the form of snow. Then as we got further into Oklahoma and into northern Texas in the form of rain, you can see a fairly welcome half-inch or so rain over this area right here of Oklahoma and Texas. Bands of snow in Kansas. And I outlined here areas that have received no precipitation at all last week, very dry in that region. But I think if we look at the percent of normal precipitation over the last week, you can see for the most part over the south, quite dry. The dark red is 25% or less of precipitation. A couple pockets of blue, that's above normal. So sort of a mixed bag over Oklahoma and North Texas into Kansas. But anywhere over the west and south part of Texas, well below normal precipitation over the last week. Now, we did have some very significant snow that developed in Colorado, moved across Kansas into Missouri. The maroon is an inch or so of snow. The green is 4 to 6 inches, and then we got nearly a foot of snow over the St. Louis area into Illinois. It extended into parts of Oklahoma, but that's pretty much gone. We can see that here as far as the snow depth. There's no snow left. It melted very, very quickly. That's typical of snows that we get this early in spring. Pretty much, I think we're getting close to the end of the snow season, maybe some lingering snow here and there. You can see very clearly here, this is where the southern edge of the snow extent is, and there could be some spring flooding in that area. Matter of fact, this shows the spring flood potential over the south. Right now, we don't expect a risk of flooding. It looks like it's going to be confined to the upper Midwest in a very confined area this year. For the most part across the nation, I think it's going to be well below normal as far as what we would normally get in a spring. So let's take a look at soil moisture here. Just like to review this from time to time. I think a couple things to point out, and the thing that really stands out here is that we still need more rain, especially over almost all of Texas, still parts of Oklahoma. Now, on the other hand, look at the areas in white. There has been some improvement, and that's sort of a neutral type of situation. There still needs to be more rain, but that's getting into the 50th percentile or so. Still not above normal, but definitely some improvement we've seen from rain and snow over the winter. Now, keep in mind, we almost always will see some improvement over the winter months. I'm going to be talking a lot more about that in my newsletter, by the way, as far as winter season recharge. But I think the story as we exit winter, get into spring, is that we still need more precipitation, and you can see it here, especially in the areas of red. Now, the Arctic Oscillation, last week in my briefing, I mentioned that it was getting towards an all-time, maybe not an all-time, but certainly since record keeping has been a negative phase, a record negative phase. You can see it here. It really dipped well into negative territory here, especially when you compare it to what we've had so far this winter. One of the things I'd like to point out here is it's often during these transitions here when we get the most active precipitation. And we're going now from a negative phase back up to neutral. So this is a very significant transition here, and oftentimes that's when we get the enhancement of precipitation trends. So the forecast here calls for the Arctic Oscillation to dip once again and then come back up. So we're having some fairly significant fluctuations over the next couple weeks. I wanted to point out, though, that look at all these transitions. We've had this one transition here into this deeply negative phase. Here's another one heading back up to positive. Here's another one dipping down again, and here's another one actually going into a positive phase. So with that does mean we're going to have some active precipitation bands across the nation over the next couple weeks. So here's the big picture. When we get back into this more of a neutral type Arctic Oscillation, we oftentimes get a split jet stream. It can either be one jet stream, sort of a cohesive jet stream from west to east, but often it's this split jet stream. And the southerly branch is usually the branch of the jet stream that's more active. I've sort of outlined here in this dashed red line the area that's expected to be the most active for precipitation this week. And it is going to bring some enhanced precipitation to parts of the south. Now, the energy that's embedded in this week's jet stream is not overly impressive. So it looks to me like there will be periods of showers and storms, most likely manageable amounts of precipitation that will be able to soak in and replenish upper soils. Now, there could be some excess here and there, but for the most part, this is a fairly good situation for soil moisture charge replenishment. And I did want to point out, I mentioned that there is a chance of some stronger storms and some heavier rain in some spots, and this is a precipitable water image, and I do show this from time to time. And as we get into the spring and eventually summer, I'm going to be talking a lot less about Arctic oscillation and a lot more about precipitable water. But I did want to show that right now, as of early this week on Sunday, it is above 1 inch, and keep in mind that precipitable water is the total amount of water in the atmospheric column. So this is, if we had something to provide lift, this would give some indication of how much the potential for rain would be. And it's pretty high over the eastern part of Texas into southeast Oklahoma. So that's where the possibility of more significant precipitation will be, because we know the moisture is already in place. So the forecast for the next 7 days, you can see a fairly significant rain event over most of Oklahoma here, anywhere between a ½ inch to a little bit over 1 inch of rain, and maybe even up to 1.5 inches. And then over the eastern, maybe even 2/3 of Texas, this is going to be a significant recharge event over this area, anywhere from 1 to over 2 inches of rain. And then as it moves off to the east, actually even heavier, because it's going to be pulling in moisture here from the Gulf. But this does look like a very significant rain event, and maybe a very beneficial rain event, because it's going to come over multiple days, and that will help soil moisture replenishment. Now, it's interesting to look at week 2. This is a climate model that I've been showing from time to time. This is week 1, and areas in green are enhanced precipitation. Areas in red are reduced precipitation. Now, look at this here. Here's that southerly jet. Here's that northerly jet. Quiet with the northerly jet, active with the southerly jet. Let's look at week 2. There are some signs of a continued wet pattern over parts of the south in week 2. We'll have to keep an eye on this. It may or may not occur. Most likely what's going to happen as we get into that positive phase of the Arctic oscillation, we're going to get a ridging or a bowing of the jet stream over the east, dipping in the west, and that could enhance some precipitation again. Most likely fairly modest precipitation, but it could bring some more, especially into Oklahoma and Kansas, maybe extending into Texas as well. So within the next 2 weeks, this is soil moisture improvement or changes. And across the whole nation, look at this. Here in Texas is the highest amount of potential soil moisture improvement. And I think that could be significant. It could be welcome over most of the area. I know some areas are getting a bit wet because this is an area that's received some precipitation over the winter. But keep in mind, let's get some in the ground here going into summer. And I think for the most part, we need some precipitation in here. Now, after this, it's going to be maybe a bit wet because it is going to change on the positive side here. It'd be a little bit better to get it maybe a further west, but this will be fairly significant here and positive anomalies over a fairly large area over the next 2 weeks. So the takeaway points this week: influence of the southerly jet as we go through another transition of the Arctic oscillation from negative to positive, with periods of rain, showers and thunderstorms, some soil moisture improvement, and maybe even more activity on the positive side for week 2. Wish you all a happy Easter. We'll be issuing my newsletter later this week. I'll be talking more about the outlook. Feel free to email me anytime if I'm not answering your questions, or if you have anything you'd like to pass along to me. If not, I'll be talking to you again next Sunday about this time.